In Deuteronomy 31, 19 and 20, it says, I call on heaven and earth to witness against you today, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, and both you and your descendants may live. In Deuteronomy 4, 25 through 27, when you have begot children and grandchildren, and they've grown old in the land, and act corruptly, and make carved images in the form of anything, and do evil in the sight of the Lord your God to provoke him to anger, I call on heaven and earth to witness against you this day. And you will soon utterly perish from the land which you crossed over the Jordan to possess, and you will not prolong your days in it, but be utterly destroyed. In the book of Enoch, it says, and they began to sin against birds, against beasts, against reptiles and fish, and devour one another's flesh and drink blood. And then the earth laid accusations against the lawless ones. Now, if you have trouble with the validity or the validation of the book of Enoch, Judah, the brother of Jesus, directly quotes from Enoch, which is not in the canonized Bible, but only in the book of Enoch. Okay. Now, with the statement of Enoch was in reference to the flood. And God said to look upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh has had corruption in the way of the earth. And in Hebrew, it is written that the earth requested that God look upon it and see the corruption, as if the earth had called for the judgment of the flood from God. And like I said before, I believe the earth still testifies to the character of mankind. And if you don't believe it, listen to what Shua says. Some of the Pharisees called on him from the crowd, Teacher, rebuke your disciples. But he answered and said to them, I tell you, if these should be silent, then the stones themselves would immediately cry out. He went on to say, for days will come upon you when your enemies will build embankments around you, surround you and close in on you on every side, and level you and your children within you to the ground. And they will not leave you one stone upon another, because you did not know the time of your visitation. Now let's set up the scene. We have Shua coming into Jerusalem on a donkey's colt that had never been ridden, had never been rode, and never worked. He's coming into the city from the Mount of Olives through the eastern gate, and the Pharisees tell him to quiet the people. And then he tells them what we just read. Now this quote is credited by Christians and Jewish scholars alike as a prophetic moment for Yeshua. Jewish scholars even go as far to call him a great prophet because of this moment. But they didn't hear the whole statement. In Matthew, it says, then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two, from top to bottom. The earth quaked, and the rocks were split. The earth responded to the death of Yeshua in the same way it responded to Abel's blood, crying out that man had shed innocent blood. I think we can clearly see that the earth, even in the time of Yeshua, was very close to God, and its relationship likened to our relationship with God, except for one thing. The earth is still a perfect creation, and its only flaw still rests at Adam. In many of Yeshua's parables, he refers to harvest and shepherds and flocks and first fruits and fig trees, and the fig tree that yielded no fruit. If we look, he's continuing to tie us back to the earth. So how would God expect us to treat his land, his earth? In the same way he did in the time of Moses, to honor the 7-year Sabbath. The Sabbath of the land, that the land deserved its rest. During the 7-year Sabbath, every debt was to be forgiven, and every man was returned to the land of his heritage. It was the same for the earth. It was released from its work, and it was allowed to do as it was designed, willingly yield up fruit. And even one step further, on every Sabbath, the earth was given rest because no man was allowed to work. I can imagine that during the 7-year Sabbath, that the men, the farmers who respected the earth, the herdsmen who had respected the earth, they reaped even more in the 7th year than they had in the 6 years previous. But I can also imagine that the men who did not respect the ground, it dried up and didn't give them anything. Folks, there is nothing, I repeat, nothing that science can do to repair what's gone wrong with the earth. The earth will dry up when and where it wants to dry up, and it will yield fruit when and where it wants to yield fruit. And I have seen the proof of this. My daughter Jasmine, one day, just planted a bulb, a hosta plant, a full shade plant that is very temperamental. Most people cannot even get them to grow. I can't get them to grow. She took this bulb, stuck it in the dirt, and walked away. This is in a full sun area in Texas. 100+ degrees on this patio where this flower box is, and every year that plant comes back. And it gets bigger and bigger every year. Somehow that baffles me and rattles my mind a little bit, but God told that little girl through this plant that, yes, Jasmine, I will let that grow. And the earth responded. So what is it we can do to save the planet? Not a thing. The Bible says that the earth will pass away, and surely it will pass away. But it's our responsibility to respect the land, to love the earth, and appreciate God's creation while we're here to enjoy it. And that's my teaching.